Good afternoon and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Boca Raton. I am Jim Smith, a member of our Healing Justice group. Our guest is Colin, the former mayor of Pahokee. In the Glades, he is a resident there and an activist in western Palm Beach County. And he's being delayed by a thunderstorm and flooding in that area, but he is en route. There are restrooms in the back and to the right. Ask the ushers for help locating them. There's another event taking place involving a meditation group, so we ask you to please be silent if you leave this room. And there are light refreshments in the back. Please help yourselves. There'll be a break about 1 hour into the program. So I'm going to start now with some of the history. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand and my wife Lynn will give you an index card to write it. And then she'll collect the cards and bring them to me. But it's not a debate. It's an educational program. And for the folks on Zoom, if you'll type your question in the chat, Lynn will put them on an index card and bring them to me also. I've also been asked to announce that we have our T-shirts available for anybody marching in the Martin Luther King Day Parade on Monday for a goodwill donation of $20. But you can pay what you can. Today's program on capitalism begins a 4-part series I'm calling Freedom School, and it's something we did at Shelter Rock in New York 3.5 years ago. This series was inspired by our interim minister, Reverend Kathy Ricky, who asked me to speak to our congregation and others about structural racism. After I talk about the history of racism in this country, Colin will share his thoughts on the environmental racism attached to sugarcane burning at harvest time in the Glades. Colin previously joined us for a worship service in 2021. He is a married father of 4, a veteran of U.S. Army Reserves, and has a master's degree in public administration from Ashford University. He is a member of the Sierra Club Stop the Burn campaign and estimates that he gave at least 20 interviews in 2023. He promised he would bear with me while I go over some of the history. The 1619 Project, which we read and discussed in 2022 with our former minister, Reverend Harris Reardon, is a groundbreaking book assembled by New York Times reporter Nicole Hannah-Jones. It demonstrates that many inequalities that disadvantage Blacks today stem from the brutal, dehumanizing system of slavery employed in this country until the Civil War. In the following 3 weeks, we'll be looking at healthcare, education, and housing with community co-presenters in each case. But today, the focus is on capitalism and environmental racism. I see Colin has arrived, and his wife. So Colin, please step up.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Welcome, buddy.
All right.
I already told them you're gonna put up with me going through some of the history.
All right.
Our country was founded by wealthy white landowners and financed with free labor provided by enslaved people who were imported forcibly, mostly from West Africa. Southern cotton became the cornerstone of a global commodities trade. Slavery was its engine. Sugar was the second most important trading product. By the 1850s, Louisiana planters produced 1/4 of the world's sugar supply. On the eve of the Civil War, the Mississippi Valley was home to more millionaires than any other section of the country. Slave owners used spreadsheets to calculate the productivity of each slave. Each slave had a market value and a depreciation quotient. They were used as collateral for loans, and their bodies sometimes sold to medical schools as cadavers. Faster workers were placed at the head of a picking line, which encouraged those who followed to match the captain's productivity. Those who lagged behind were beaten. The 1619 Project shows how slavery helped shape our laws governing property, financial regulation, management techniques, and accounting systems, and led to the development of American capitalism. Slavery is imprinted in the DNA of American capitalism. A system of low-road capitalism has developed after the Civil War, in which wages are depressed and businesses compete over the price, not the quality of goods. These days, the richest 1% of Americans own 40% of the country's wealth, and the wealth of whites exceeds that of blacks 18-1. A larger share of the population in the U.S. lives in poverty than in virtually any other nation. The income equality also was evident on the eve of the Civil War, when the Mississippi Valley developed those millionaires I talked about. Slavery shaped our laws governing property, financial regulation, management techniques, and accounting systems, and also led to the development of Wall Street in New York. Courts protected slavery in case after case. Corporations' power was protected when the Supreme Court decided in the 1880s that corporations were entitled to equal protection under the law. The 1619 Project shows that our tax system is regressive and was born out of compromises steered by debates over slavery. By 2018, by the way, 60 Fortune 500 companies paid no federal income tax at all. Slavery was the driver of the North's economy as northern textile mills spun cotton grown and harvested by slaves. Slavery weakened the American labor movement as capitalists leveraged slavery to divide workers, free from unfree, white from black, diluting their collective power. Big Sugar uses the same tactics today, pitting Hispanic field workers in the glades against blacks who protest against the sugarcane burning at harvest time. And Colin, isn't it so that advocates for change are called job killers by these folks and by Big Sugar?
That is correct. Good afternoon, everyone. That is a correct statement to make.
And what do you folks respond?
Our response to Big Sugar and the efforts to divide the community, specifically the question that you asked, because there's so much going on with Big Sugar, but as it pertains to the particular question you're asking about our black, brown brothers and sisters being pitted against each other in the Glades community. The history behind that started with the protests of islanders protesting the work conditions and the wages back in the 70s and 80s. And in going through that protest, going through the court system and losing, a little bit of history on that too as well. One of our own represented the industry in this battle, which is Willie Gary. Willie Gary, who is known as the East Coast Johnny Cochran, at that time represented the sugar industry against his people. He came from sharecroppers. And as we know, as we talk about capitalism, capitalism tends to drive at the soul of men. They will do anything for money. And one of our own turned against us to represent the industry in that battle. As we move forward, mechanism of the industry also drove, by capitalism, also drove a wedge between the black and brown community. The lie that was told to the black community was, we're mechanizing, we do not need that labor at that level anymore because we're mechanizing. Then we fast forward, that happened in the early 90s when the mechanism of sharecropping in the glades became to the forefront. At that time, the islanders that were brought here to reap the sugarcane, they were told, we don't need you anymore. Then we fast forward to 2010, 2012, 2015, the industry has now turned to Central America, our brown brothers and sisters for that labor. So now you can imagine what's happening within the community where one segment of the population was told you're no longer needed, but now we are bringing brown brothers and sisters in to work the fields and to work within the industry. But the blacks that are there, we're told, oh, you're lazy, you don't want a job, you don't want to work. So that same mechanism, that trick that was used in the 60s, 50s to say that blacks are shiftless, they don't want to work. This is how it's done when you're told you're no longer needed and someone else comes in to do the job that you were doing for many years. Now you're told you're shiftless, you're lazy. But in essence, what's happening is you were basically terminated from your job. So now you're battling to make a livelihood for your families, and the industry is the main workforce within the area. So you have a population of individuals who were raised to be sharecroppers, so paying attention to education, bettering yourself. These things were not at the forefront for blacks. They were basically preparing to go to work in the fields. So this is just fast forwarding a little bit as to how our economy in the Glades is functioning, why we have our black brothers and sisters not really thriving as much, because you're basically put in an oppressive situation. So now you're in a situation where you have to kick in your survival mode.
Thank you. I'm going to point something out and then continue a little bit with the current situation. The growers hire non-citizens in the field, and the seasonal nature of their work and the risk of deportation leads to low wages and makes it hard to unionize them. So Big Sugar wins every which way. Now, the sugar cane is burned at harvest time to remove the waste products and make it easier to get the sucrose. The process produces smoke and ash that wafts over the poor communities, polluting their water and causing increased rates of asthma and cancer. And it's also been shown that it leads to 1 to 6 deaths a year. Florida is the largest sugarcane producing state in the U.S., and most of it is produced in the organic soils along the southeast and southern shores of Lake Okeechobee in western Palm Beach County. Half the cane sugar produced in the U.S. comes from Florida, where the growing season is long and winters are generally warm. Florida accounts for 1/5 of all sugar consumed in the country, and 70% of Florida's more than 400,000 acres in cultivation are in Palm Beach County. The planting takes place in August through January, and the harvesting between late October and mid-April. It's $1 billion industry that supports 14,000 jobs and has a big impact on the state's economy. It is controlled by a half-dozen companies, the largest being Florida Crystals Corp., U.S. Sugar, and the Sugarcane Growers Cooperative. For the past 9 years, the Sierra Club has waged this Stop the Burn campaign, trying to convince Big Sugar to transition to green harvesting without success. It continues to burn because it always has. It disputes studies that link the burning to health defects. The companies contend that green harvesting is too costly. Of course, it's been shown that there are spin-off industries that would be created if the harvest was green, such as using the waste products for biofuel. Now, Colin has stayed home to advocate for a better life for Glades residents. And Colin, I spoke to you the other day about the inspiration for you to become an activist a few years ago. And
Yes.
You told me about the health of your own family.
That's correct. Just to share a little bit, our health issues within my own family. So if it's within my family, I know it's within the community, and our community tends to suffer in silence. With my own personal experience with returning home from Wisconsin, I graduated, a little bit of history about myself. Graduated high school in 1992, matriculated through Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. That's where I met my beautiful wife, Kimberly. We wedded each other in 1999, so we still party like it's 1999. I returned home from college in 97, young, full of energy. My degree is in criminal justice. When I came home, I became a juvenile probation officer. I worked also in alternative education with the Pace Center for Girls, an all-girls school, which was an interesting experience to be a male on an all-girls school campus. I then decided to seek greener pastures, so to speak. So I matriculated to Milwaukee, where my wife is from, and that's where I cultivated my business acumen. I cultivated my social awareness. Being in the Midwest, being so close to, at that time then, Senator Barack Obama, which was an hour away out of in Chicago. Chicago is like a hotbed for Black inspiration. You have the Honorable Louis Farrakhan there, and several other Black leaders within the Midwest. So my flames really got stroked just hearing all of these different gentlemen talking about how to make the Black experience in America better. And one of the quotes that stuck with me with then Barack Obama, Senator Barack Obama, he made a statement that stated, the Black agenda is an American agenda. I think sometimes we try to separate the Black experience from America as if Black Americans are seeking something different than any other American. Black Americans are seeking the same thing: prosperity, peace, joy within their lives, you know, the things that the Constitution states that we all should pursue. So once I returned home with that fire in 2010, and in returning home, dealing with my health, there's something that happened. I came home in August of 2010, and by November of 2010, I started experiencing this itching sensation on my tongue and the palms of my hands. Never experienced this before. So of course, I sought medical attention, and I went to an allergist, and he shared with me, and this is in Wellington, an allergist in Wellington, and he shared with me, oh, you know, just looking at my paperwork, oh, you're in Pahokee. Oh, you're out there with the sugarcane. You're smack dab in the middle of farming. So he then talked to me about the smoke and the insecticides, the pesticides, the herbicides. Even though I grew up as a kid, I never experienced any allergic reactions, but I attributed obtaining these allergic reactions by traveling and basically cleaning your system. As you travel the world, you know, I went back to Barbados, in the Midwest and in Central America, you know, so my body is being cleansed, and returning home, my body reacted to the environment that I was in. And not only with myself, my daughter, she started experiencing allergic reactions within the community. So we took her to the doctor, and lo and behold, she's allergic to, and we were in the Midwest, and she never had anything, any kind of allergic reactions to anything. The Midwest is a high a wheat producer. But my daughter is allergic to wheat and allergic to grass, and we never knew these types of things. It's like, wow. So we're dealing with that. And then my youngest son, Josiah, he was born a preemie. He has experienced asthmatic reactions in Wisconsin, but nothing to the level that he experienced when he came home here in Pahokee in Florida. So these are the things that were personally happening to me. So that was my driving force behind when I saw my counterpart in South Bay, then Mayor Shanique Scott, who invited the Sierra Club to speak at one of her meetings. And I watched the meeting, and I just saw her share passion to seek help with the conditions that the community was under. So then as mayor, I reached out to her, my sister city mayor, and we talked, and I was like, well, I want to be a part of this because I'm affected personally, and I know our community is a community that suffers in silence, so someone has to speak out. So if it may be the two progressive leaders within the community, let's join hands, and thank you, Sierra Club, for coming in and helping us to organize our efforts to push back against what we know is a detriment to the people of the community. And that's where I am today with the Sierra Club.
Thank you, Colin. Now, Black and brown communities around the U.S. long have been beset by health hazards stemming from their location near toxic dumps, landfills, and polluted water and air. In 2021, I ran a Zoom conference down here with Rashid Sheikh, the chair of the Black Caucus of the Unitarian Universalist Ministry for Earth. He was my keynote speaker. And I also had health professionals and activists. And the pediatrician that was on the panel discussed the fact that during the burning season, the emergency rooms are packed with children brought in by their parents for smoke inhalation problems and asthma and coughs, bronchitis. So Rashid Sheikh stressed the importance of voting for minority residents seeking better living conditions, but the deck in many cases is stacked against them. Colin, have there been any ballot measures in the Glades seeking to force Big Sugar to stop the burning?
Unfortunately not. Our local elected officials are basically, for the lack of a better term, they're in bed with the industry. Their entire focus is basically not to better the conditions of the people, but it's basically to support the industry in whatever efforts they deem profitable for them. our local elected officials outside of myself. I was elected mayor, just a little bit more backdrop. I was elected mayor in 2013. My passion and push to become mayor of the city of Pahokee was I introduced myself to then Mayor Sasser, who was the mayor of Pahokee at the time, and just trying to share with him accountability measures, to share with him just you have citizens returning home that can help to support any type of activism that you would like to do to hold our industry to an account. And in just opening up to him and sharing with him, he basically rebuffed me and he told me to get out of his office. You know, I mean, that was like the light bulb just clicked in my head. This man doesn't represent us. You know, he's representing whatever special interests he deems fit for his profitability. And I was like, no, this can't be. So I then turned to other community leaders within the church, within the school system, and just introducing myself to let those individuals know that I'm an individual that's going to represent the plight of the people. So that resonated with the population, the populace then at that time. I was elected mayor in 2013. And I tried to introduce things as the mayor, and of course that's pushback right away, and that basically killed my quote-unquote political career. But I always share with everyone, I'm not a politician, I'm an activist. I'm here to try to make things better for all of us. Politics is a tool that we use to make things better, but I'm not a politician. I'm not going to quote unquote, take the brown bag. And I was approached with that, you know, try to buy you off. And here is, you know, well, Mayor, here you go, take this and you push this agenda that we have here. And I was like, well, that's not the people's agenda. That's the industry's agenda. I can't speak solely in support of the industry. I was never against the industry, but I can't speak solely in the industry's interest when there are many other interests that the community has that they're trying to bring forward. And the industry, you guys have a lot of money, a lot of influence. You can push your power somewhere else, but not on the city of Pahokee. And that's basically what led me to be unelected. The mayor that's there now is a 30-something year politician within the Glades community. So of course he's marching to the beat and the drum of the industry. The mayor in Belglade, the same. The mayor in South Bay, who actually retired from the industry, of course he's a supporter of his employer. So no one in the area is basically giving pushback to the industry and the things that they're doing. So they basically have carte blanche. But what I'm hopeful, because I see that our efforts are making headways. I've noticed something this year that the industry had in place a 200 to 300 yard buffer around certain infrastructure, schools, stores, and things of that nature, but they never followed their own policy. They would always burn within the area. But I noticed this year that they're now starting to follow their own 300-yard policy. So they're kind of burning a little bit outside of the city limits, but they're still on top of us. But that gives me a lot of hope to let us know that our efforts we are cutting through some of the red tape. We are getting to the hearts of men, because that's what we're trying to win with the industry. We're trying to win their hearts. Our cry to them has always been to be better neighbors to us. Better neighbors to us. And that's always been our cry. It's never been, we want you to go, we want you to leave. It's never been our cry, but that's always the thing they use. Oh, you're a job killer. You want to take jobs away, you know, basically scaring the local populace.
Thank you, Colin. I'm noticing that I'm moving along quicker than I expected. And before I get into recent developments and more background on Big Sugar, I want to backtrack for a minute to a little bit more history that I didn't know I'd have room for. After the Civil War, sugar plantations organized themselves around the labor of free Black workers who made some short-lived gains. But federal troops were withdrawn from the South in 1877 in a compromise deal that allowed Rutherford B. Hayes to be president in a disputed election, and all the gains that Blacks made during Reconstruction were rolled back. The Confederacy and its leaders were romanticized. The belief that Blacks were an inferior race persisted, and there was complicity by scientists, government, and clergy. Blacks were largely absent from history books. Nearly all labor unions denied membership to free Black workers. Some Blacks were actually used as strike breakers to drive a wedge between them and whites. Now, after the Civil War, many formerly enslaved Blacks were pushed into indentured servitude or prison labor and leased out to companies as convict laborers. Many states, believe it or not, still benefit from free convict labor right now, provided to corporations under a provision of the 13th Amendment. And this was discussed at Paula Cole Jones's monthly meeting on Wednesday night, that the 13th Amendment allows involuntary servitude as punishment for crimes. And it still has not been outlawed. And there's a Unitarian Universalist campaign to try to get that amendment revised. So that's more of the background. Now, when Colin discussed that more or less the fix is in for Big Sugar to ignore the protests, one of the reasons is the right to farm law, which was passed about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that it was passed 110 to 17 in the state legislature after $11 million worth of campaign contributions to both Republicans and Democrats in the 2020 election. And that right to farm law actually prohibits any lawsuits on the basis of someone claiming a health defect from inhalation of the smoke and ash. In addition, the Palm Beach County Health Department has been silent. There are only 3 air quality monitors in the whole county, and they don't pick up short-term spikes caused by the burning of the sugar cane. So, Sierra Club adopted a different tactic this year. On August 25, they filed a... Restroom. Yes. My wife will take it. On October 25, Sierra Club filed a federal complaint with the Environmental Protection Agency for discrimination under the 1965 Civil Rights Act. The complaint says that while burning permits are routinely granted when the wind blows toward the poor Glades communities, the burning permits are denied when the wind blows toward Wellington and West Palm Beach. Now, on November 1, Reverend Kathy, our minister, took part in a demonstration outside the county health department in West Palm, and she delivered a letter to the department chief asking why the department is violating its own mission statement by not issuing any health warnings during the growing season. and the harvest burning season. So what has happened? No response yet on the federal EPA complaint, and no response from the health department. And I think it's incredible that there was a multi-part series in the Palm Beach Post in 2021 that was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. That was a combination of reporting by ProPublica, which is an online media outfit, and the Post, and it showed the health hazards that result from the exposure to the smoke and ash. And actually, you know, there were editorials saying that that this was improper and should be changed. So, Colin, I just talked about the federal complaint filed with EPA and the November 1 demonstration. And, you know, you said that you see less burning happening and you think sugar may be softening its stance. You also told me that you think you can see a day when they stop burning due to federal incentives, green incentives. But if they do, it will be only on the basis of their responsibility to shareholders to maximize profits, because you said the eventual decision would be more economic than environmental.
That is correct. I do see that happening with the industry and softening their stance. They're trying to position themselves now as a little angel. What they're doing, based on the incentives that we are seeing with our green economy that's coming before us, they're basically trying to position themselves to attract as much of that monetary incentive as they can. And what we are trying to do on ground with the Sierra Club, with our lawsuit, is not only about stopping the sugarcane burning, but it's also to make sure that when our federal government starts to incentivize our local industry, that the local industry has restrictions placed on how they can utilize those funds, not only for their shareholders, but also for the empowerment of the community itself, because the industry has to be a part of the education that must take place when it comes to becoming a green economy, and it's bigger than sugar. So our industry will have to help our local populace understand how to function within a green energy society so that they can profit themselves as families, to create business ventures for themselves, to help steer their educational focus towards green mechanisms. So we are trying to, our lawsuit is asking the EPA, when the industry starts to apply for those funds, that they take a very close look at the way they allocate those funds to the industry. Do not just give them carte blanche, because we all know that those funds, those monies will go into a new yacht, a new home, a new, you know, they will use the funds to take care of themselves. History has shown us that. So we are very direct and strategic with our approach to our federal government when it comes to those funds.
And how has Sierra Club come to advocate for a 27-mile buffer zone around populated areas as a first step toward the transition to green harvesting?
Yes, we have approached our Department of Health, EPA, and the Forestry Department. They all work hand in hand. So our approach was not only to the industry to take on the personal responsibility to burn 27 miles, give us that buffer zone to burn 27 miles outside of our city limits. But we also approached the EPA and to work with our forestry department when it comes to permitting, to not allow not to issue permits to the industry if they are within that 27-mile buffer zone. We know that these things can be accomplished based on the history of the forestry department, working with the EPA and working with state health. A concession was given to our more affluent community to the east of us, Wellington. Wellington organized themselves. Of course, Wellington is basically a new community that's basically, you know, they're coming to fruition, coming to life more so in the late 80s, early 90s. So, you know, the development, the boom that was happening in Wellington, West Wellington there, east of us. A lot of mansions and pools and equestrian and all these things started to become developed. Before the sugarcane industry, they were just issued permits to burn, whether the wind was blowing east, west, north, south, it didn't matter. But Wellington organized themselves and they were successful in gaining a concession. When the wind is blowing east, no permits are given to the industry to burn. So they were successful in their efforts. So we're basically trying to utilize the same strategy to get our buffer zone to, in effect, to at least lessen the effects of the smoke and the ash within the community. We know you'll still have that because Wellington, they still get ash and smoke, but not to that level, to the point where they feel the effects, you know, they're not seeing, you know, of course, ash in their pools and on their cars and on their front porches anymore, but they still at times can get a little flurry of it because the wind can shift. Even though it started out blowing west, it can shift now to an eastern flow, which can then, of course, take the ash and the particulate matter east of us. So that's some of our strategies that we're utilizing to basically study what Wellington did to become successful. So we're trying to organize in that fashion within the Glades community. A little more difficult because, once again, leadership is not on board. Clergy, you have some that are on board and some that are not. They're loyalists to the industry. They are retired pastors from the industry, family members retired from the industry. So they have somewhat of a loyalty to the industry. So we're trying to break through those walls with our local clergy because they hold a lot of authority, so to speak, over their congregation. So whatever they preach or talk about within the pulpit, the congregation tends to be on board with. So we're trying to work with our local clergy to get on board with this, with us and our movement with the Sierra Club.
And of course, Sierra Club hasn't given up on seeking media coverage. And as part of that, I was able to interest Graham Messick, a producer at 60 Minutes, in this question. I've been hounding him for 2 years. And he is the son of a congregant at this church, and he works with an on-air talent named Bill Whitaker, who has been on air for 20 years. And Whitaker has been in Florida with a January 6th veteran. He has been in Ukraine and, of course, now in Israel. And so world events have put up a roadblock, but Messick did have a video shot in the spring of the burning of the smoke and ash. And how bad does it get, Colin? I've heard talk about people sweeping the ash off their roofs and outdoor wedding receptions where the bride's outfit is stained with the ash?
Definitely. Just think of the best way I can describe it, the day-to-day when the sugarcane is burning is, you can just think of apocalyptic Armageddon. You have to see it. You have to come and see it.
let me just say that the first time I saw it, when John and Betty and Louise and myself and Lynn went to the Glades, the only thing I could compare it to was a B-52 strike. And I remembered a specific one outside of Khartoum in '72. And I just said, oh my God, how could they do this so close to a populated area?
Correct. Yes. And it's frightening. It's frightening. As an adult, it's frightening to me. Because once again, I grew up in the area, but my mind never thought of it like this, because you just go along to get along. But when I returned home, and now I have my family, and we're riding to go to Belgrade, and I never saw this before, or never seen it through adult lens before. But as you're driving, the industry has protection. They have protection from PBSO, where PBSO would actually be parked up on the sides of the road.
And
lights.
what is that?
PBSO is Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. They will park on the side of the road because the smoke and the ash becomes so blinding, and you have to drive through it. So you have PBSO now that's there basically helping you to see through, because the lights are glaring. You know, they're there to slow you down, you know, just to give you a sense of calm. Because when you drive through the smoke and the ash and the flames, you know, you're talking about flames that are shooting 20, 30 feet in the air, because it engulfs, they start burning from the outside. What you'll see is you'll see you'll see someone, they're riding on the side, on the outsides of the cane, and they're basically hitting certain areas with flammable material, maybe gasoline, whatever that flammable material that they're using. So you'll see that person riding around the square footage of the field, and then the next person behind them, they'll have a torch, and they're just gonna hit certain areas, and before you know it, this thing is, they call it a controlled burn, but it's really out of control, because it takes a strength from the people, especially when you are aware of what's happening around. It takes a certain amount of strength to get through this process, because you can actually lose your sense of calm when you're in the midst of it, because you can't see, there's smoke, ash, flames, and at times you can only see about this far ahead of you, you know, so it can become extremely, your anxiety level goes up. It does go up. And at times you'll see our older population, you'll see them just pull to the side of the road. You know, they're like, because you can't see. So you have to pull over 5-10 minutes later, because it happens pretty quick. It's an intense something that happens quick. It happens in about 5 to 10 minutes, where it just engulfs the field, smoke and ash, flames, and then it just dies down to this quiet. But when you look up, you see the big plume of smoke hanging over you, because you can see clearly in front of you, but when you look up, now you see the effects that's happening around you, because there's this big plume of smoke. But there's also not only smoke, it's a plume of ash. You can see the ash just moving and falling. You know, of course, there are things that's happening that we cannot see, which we now identify as particulate matter, those microscopic little things that we're breathing in. We don't see it, but we're breathing it in. So now all of a sudden you'll get that sudden little cough, like, you know, you're like, oh, I'm coughing. Why am I coughing? I have no purpose to cough. I'm not doing anything. But lo and behold, particulate matter, these are things that we're trying to educate the community on, sharing of information with the community, so that they can understand why it's so hard for you to breathe at times. Go ahead.
So I'm thinking right now that I've covered almost everything I need to cover, and that we're just going to forge on through for about 20 minutes. The one thing I wanted to say is that advocates like myself realize that the campaign to put health warnings on cigarette packs took 30-something years. And while we're hoping that it doesn't take that long to outlaw this burning practice, we're prepared for the long haul. And as Colin knows, Sierra Club has been conducting community meetings and tours of the burning area to just try to spread the news to folks so that they don't have the wool pulled over their eyes. And, you know, Patrick Ferguson, who is the lawyer that's been involved in this campaign for about 6 years, said to me that Big Sugar's greatest ally is ignorance and apathy, and that the more they can shed a light on this practice, the better they'll be. So now we get to how can we be allies? How can we help? How can we support Colin and his community in this fight? And of course, the obvious way is to donate specifically to the campaign through www.stopsugarburning.org. And on that site, you can also sign a petition urging the transition to green harvesting. What else, Colin? What can we do to try to be allies to you?
Yes. There are roughly 38 municipalities within Palm Beach County, and we are all in this thing together. So what we are asking our other municipalities, our other citizenry to do with us is, you can do basic things like you're doing now. Education about what's really happening in our own backyards, because a lot of the time, individuals do not travel west. Palm Beach County is a north-south, for the most part, matriculated area. So we don't venture out west to see what's happening with our neighbors to the west of us. So I would say to come out as a start to see, you know, what's happening out west. The community is extremely depleted of resources. The community has, our greatest asset are the people of the Glades, not sugar. The people of the Glades are the greatest assets. When we look at the individuals, and I learned this being in Wisconsin, this phenomenon called brain drain. Brain drain, if you're not familiar with it, is when your brightest and your best tend to leave your community. Within the Glades community, we practice this on an annual basis with our high school graduates. When our high school students graduate, they go off to college, they edify themselves through education, they learn a lot about the world, and then they're not coming back because there's nothing for me to come back to. The infrastructure of the Glades is extremely poor, extremely poor. The jobs, they're basically no jobs. The industry talks about jobs, but I can share with you, they do not employ the Glades citizens. What has happened over the years, we have, as Jim spoke to, we have that immigrant population that's coming in to actually do a lot of the work. And you have, because of the mechanism of the industry and the lack of the education of the local populace, they can't work those jobs. For example, when things were done by man, we had individuals that would go out and check on the crop. You know, they would drive around, get soil samples and things of that nature. Now all of these things are done through drones, satellites. So it takes a certain level of education to be a part of the industry. You have to learn how to fly a drone pilot and learn the rules and regulations of flying, just like flying an airplane, how to operate satellite imagery. So back when you had a man that would go into the fields and like, oh, this patch of of sugarcane is not thriving, what do? Now there are drones that are flown to see that, satellite pictures, imageries that are taken to see where the sugarcane is not flourishing as well. So that eliminates a lot of the local populace. So to have individuals such as yourselves to come out and interact with the local population, the buying of foods, and one of the things that we encourage is to buy organic sugar and not refined sugar. So we know we utilize a lot of sugars basically in everything that we utilize, but we ask that our friends to buy organic sugars, do things such as pick up a call to action within your church as you're doing now, within your communities. You are influential people. When you're on that golf course, talk to that state representative. If you have a connection with Skidmore, let her know that we are paying attention here in Boca to what's happening to our brothers and sisters out west. And you have to do a better job of representing them, not only representing the interests of influence and affluence, you have to represent the interests of those who are basically oppressed to try to pull them up out of this condition. So talk with your local friends. Get with your local elected officials as well. Once again, we are not only from the state level, the federal level, but local elected officials are highly influential when it comes to other local elected officials. If the mayor of Boca Raton would speak to the mayor of Belle Glade to let him know that you're unpleased with the conditions of the Glades, that will speak volumes to his heart. He will listen to his counterpart, but no one is speaking to him. He is operating in his bubble. And I mentioned the mayor of Belle Glade because when you come and you see the operations politically of the Glades area, the mayor of Belle Glade is like the de facto leader of the area. Even though they're three totally distinct, different cities, what's happening in Belle Glade affects Pahokee and South Bay. So to speak to the mayor of Belle Glade, Mayor Steve Wilson, to let him know that we have eyes on the situation on ground, that will cause him to start to operate in a different light, because now he knows that, oh, the industry is not the only one watching me. There are other people watching me and watching what I'm saying, the policies I'm bringing forward or lack thereof, because that's one of the issues that we're faced with in the Glades community. There are no policies brought forward. Everything is just carte blanche. There's no accountability to anything within the Glades area. Not only the industry, there's a lot, no accountability to PBSO. And I get passionate when I talk about my community and the conditions of it, because I know it can change if man changes. We have to change the minds and the souls of man to affect the change in the conditions that we want to see out west. We would love to look like Boca Raton. You know, I don't want to, because my wife and I, we're contemplating leaving the area when our son, our baby boy graduates in 2025. We're contemplating leaving. And I get emotional about it because I don't want to go. Because I love the people, I love the area, but the conditions are just too much to bear. It's too much. The lack of jobs, the sheer lack of being recognized and noticed that we are part of Palm Beach County. It's really painful at times. We had an elected president that we were 50 miles away from the president, and still, you know, in the hearts and minds of people, they think that something can change when, oh, we got our, because a lot of, the area is highly Democratic, a lot of Democrats, but a lot of individuals voted for Donald Trump. A lot of Democrats voted for this man because they figured that if we got a resident from our own, not state, but county, our neighbor, that something could change. So they voted thinking that something would change, and nothing changed. It's just getting worse. So we're asking that our influence, pay attention to us, help us in this manner, come out, visit us, attend some of our leadership meetings. When you come to visit, attend a city commission meeting and sit and see what's happening, what's going on, and speak to them after the meeting, before the meeting, to let them know Boca Raton is paying attention. We're here, we're watching you. So these are the things that you can try to do to help us as we try to help our own selves.
Thank you. The last two things I'm going to mention before I ask Lynn and the audience for questions are, I'm going to mention that the sugar industry is subsidized federally to keep the price artificially high. And, you know, there's a book, we met the authors a couple of weeks ago back in New York, and it's called something about how sugar changed the world. And it talks about the multi-million dollars made off this, and the candy, and the diabetes that results, and the unequal burden on Black people because they live in deserts, grocery deserts, where there's no Publix in the glades. So nutrition suffers, and so there's a higher incidence of diabetes in the Black population, and they're targeted with media ads. I'm also going to mention that 65 National Football League players have come out of the glades, including Anquan Bolden, who has his own foundation and is a candidate for the Hall of Fame. And so, having been a pro football writer, I suggested to some of the advocates that, you know, we try to get these NFL players on board to advocate for green harvesting. And as Colin knows, Big Sugar has contributed to the establishing of a Glades NFL Hall of Fame, thereby effectively silencing the whatever protests these athletes might have. Mm-hmm. So, Lynn, are there any, no Zoom questions? Does anybody here have a question? If you tell me the question, I'll repeat it for the audience.
My question is about the commission and whether they issues come for them at the county level.
Question is, has this issue of environmental racism come before the Palm Beach County government?
The answer is yes. The Palm Beach County governing board basically have washed their hands of the situation. In their minds, they have no control over what's happening within the community. And once again, we know that's part of ignorance and part of not wanting to be involved. So that's why we turned our efforts to the Palm Beach County Health Department. Our recent campaign efforts has focused on the health department to continue for them to, at least on a county level, issue a smoke burn warning. And we know with issuing a smoke burn warning comes information. And that's what we're asking them to do, is to at least share information with the populace so that they can start making informed decisions about their own health.
And it's amazing that when the Canadian wildfires were going over the summer and New York sky turned yellow, and some of those smoke clouds made it down this far, and the Palm Beach County Health Department issued warnings about that, but not about taking on Big Sugar because they basically support the industry.
That is correct. And that's one of the rationales that we are using as we approach the health department is you would issue a smoke warning for a wildfire thousands of miles away. We know we're being affected. Thank you for issuing that warning. Thank you for informing us, letting us know to stay indoors, letting us know to, as much as you can, wear a mask, the things that when they issued the warning, they shared information. They educated the populace about what you can do to try to help yourself when it comes to your health with smoke. But when we're burning sugarcane, there's no information being shared. And as we know, information is powerful. People tend to respond to information. Yes.
Well, I'm thinking also, I have Alexa tell me when there's a rib pie coming. I don't know how that comes across my Alexa, but it's also a very visual way for everyone to know about it. Who would be the decision maker that can include those warnings and announcements that go out? And I'm sure there's an app for that.
Yes.
Question is, who would be the governing body that would issue the warnings?
Yes. And once again, these things are all going to tie back to local, county, state, and federal governments, because whoever designed that application within your community, because that's a community-driven activated warning because of what's happening in your coastal community. So they work with the health department, they work with the state legislator to get this application passed so that they can share information that way, because it's an information sharing tool. So these are things that we're asking the EPA to look at, we're asking the health department to look at, to the forestry department to look at, to create these types of information sharing areas for the community. Yes.
Bill?
How many public health clinics are located in the Pahokee area? And I'm curious about the allocation of public health funds to that area, or is it strictly on a population basis, or who's got property values?
Yes.
And the question is, how many health clinics are there in the Glades area, and who has access to them? And I'll just interject here that the Glades area was one of the last in the state to receive a vaccination site during COVID, and they got a site at a local community center only after the intervention with Governor DeSantis of a former NFL player.
Yes, that is correct. We got our Glades area vaccination center based on Anquan Bolden reaching out through the lottery secretary, which is John Davis. Those are two local individuals graduated high school from Pahokee High School. Of course, Anquan Bolden, NFL football player, Florida State, so his influence there. And John Davis, one of our local high school graduates, played football at Florida State, but is also connected through the Republican Party. So now he's the secretary of the lottery system. So these are two influential individuals from the area that approached Governor DeSantis to basically bring forward the issues that we were faced with when it came to COVID.
And how many clinics are there?
Yes, we have one, it's funny you asked that, because in the area we had two distinct hospitals. We had one in Belglade and one in Pahokee. Those two hospitals were closed to create one hospital for the area. They centralized that hospital, the hospital there kind of like it's basically in Belgrade, but it's close to Pahokee, you know, that type of thing like that. As far as clinics, Pahokee has 2 clinics. I would say 2. There are other little that's connected to churches where the church may have a program where they would bring in a practitioner to do some medical work within the community. Belgrade has maybe 3. You have the healthcare district that's there, and then some smaller health providers within the community. Is something you wanted to share?
Yeah, you mentioned public, there is just one, it's at Concord County Bond, that's where everything is. So you have the healthcare department, the healthcare district,
Yes.
which operates the hospital in Pahokee, which is called Lakeside Medical Center, and then they have different clinics, but they're all in the middle. So they're between everything else that's within the cities are private medical centers, doctor offices, but the public centers are in the middle between Pahokee and Delray, and within the county.
Yeah.
So the answer was 1 public clinic?
Yes.
And other clinics that are tough to get to?
Yes.
In the cities.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? I think we're,
We have one here.
yes, Reverend Kathy?
Is it correct, accurate to say that the Palm Beach County Health Department gives warnings for cyanobacteria blooms, blue-green algae blooms?
Yes, they do issue
Question
warnings.
was about Palm Beach County Health Department issuing warnings about algae blooms on Lake Okeechobee.
Yes, and that is correct.
Okay, so that the algae blooms affect ways we
Yes. Actually, about a year and a half ago now, I would say, when we really had this terrible algae bloom issue, Lake Okeechobee, Pahokee is blessed to be located. It's the only city that's located you would basically say in the lake. Others have to, there are rim canals that basically push them out a little further, but Pahokee is situated basically in Lake Okeechobee. And at our marina about a year and a half ago, the algae blooms were so intense, you could not believe the stench. I mean, the stench was poisonous. The stench was so strong. Yes, it was extremely strong. I mean, the city was infused with this smell that it was unimaginable. But I can say because it took a while for our local officials to respond, you know, even though they were living in those conditions, it took a minute for them to respond, to actually reach out for support from the health department, from our state. But in either case, we suffered from those algae blooms. I mean, the algae was about this thick in the water, about 12 inches thick, to the point where they had to come and rake it. They actually accumulated it. It was so thick, you know, they had to come and rake it up and actually haul it away, you know, to dispose of it. It was so hazardous, you know, and that once again was traumatic for the community, because lack of information sharing causes panic. It causes, when you wake up and you see individuals in hazmat suits and trucks all in your community and no one is telling you anything, you're like, what's going on? You know, so it took a lot, and we were instrumental too. The Sierra Club leadership was instrumental in forcing the hand of local officials to basically share information, let the people know what's going on. A lot of panic is being created based on not sharing information on what's happening in the community. So it's one of these situations where things are just happening and no one is saying anything, you know. So I know there's help, people are trying to help, but no one is sharing the help. No one is saying anything.
So
You have never got an explanation as to why you don't get warnings from her.
Correct. Never got an
question is,
explanation.
has Colin ever gotten an explanation on why no health warnings have been issued about the burning?
No explanation was given, thus our response to the lack of the county's response, our protest outside of the building, to get them to acknowledge us, because we're sending emails, we're doing, taking out op-eds and papers, you know, just trying to get their attention. And we have yet to get a sit down. I can't think of her name, Dr. who is the, yes, the head of the healthcare district there. You know, she's not responding to us. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to please hold your questions now, and Colin will stay a few minutes afterward to talk informally if you'd like. I want to thank you, Colin, for being here today, and thank you all for attending. And I want to thank my wife, Lynn, for helping, and Jennifer Ligeti, please. Thank you very much. And our tech staff, I don't know what else to say about them. Rajiv Arora and Patrick Larson, thank you so much for being here on a day off. And this production will be recorded and available on the website for those who were not able to make it. And next Saturday at 1 p.m., we'll be featuring Kenya Madison from a group called Healthier Delray, and the topic will be how Blacks are disadvantaged by the healthcare system. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Jim.
Fantastic.
All right.